My sister slept with my husband, and my own mom convinced them to get married just to secure the bag. They thought I was the past. They thought the architect would just fade away into the New York rain. Little did they know, while they were picking out flowers for the plaza, I was picking out their prison sentences. I stood there in the shadows, watching them celebrate my erasure, and realized they forgot one thing. I didn't just build this family's fortune, I wired the explosives. And I was holding the detonator. The rain in New York doesn't just fall, it assaults you. It was a relentless, freezing downpour that lashed against the windows of my town car, blurring the city lights into streaks of hostile neon. I had just landed at JFK after 3 grueling days in London, salvaging the Canary Wharf acquisition, a deal my husband, Julian, had almost torpedoed with his characteristic blend of arrogance and laziness. My eyes burned from 72 hours of sleepless negotiations and bad coffee, my shoulders aching under the weight of my Toomey laptop bag. All I wanted was a hot bath, a glass of vintage Merlot, and the silence of my Hamptons estate. I wanted to tell Julian that I had fixed his mess, that Thorne and Vance Developments, the empire we had built over 22 years, was safe for another quarter. I pulled the car into the long, gravel driveway. The lights were blazing in the living room, casting long, golden rectangles onto the wet, manicured lawn. That was strange. Usually, by 10 p.m. on a Tuesday, the house was dark. Julian would be in his study nursing a scotch, and my 21-year-old son, Leo, would be in the city or gaming in his room. I unlocked the heavy oak front door, the mechanism clicking with a familiar weight, and dropped my keys in the crystal bowl on the foyer table. The silence that greeted me wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, pressurized, like the air in a submarine before the hull cracks. "Hello?" I called out, hanging up my trench coat. "Julian? Leo? Is everything okay?" "In here, Elena." My mother's voice floated out from the living room. My stomach tightened into a knot. My mother, Margaret, lived in Connecticut. She hated driving into New York at night. A sudden, irrational panic gripped me. Had something happened to my younger sister, Chloe? Was someone sick? I rushed into the living room, my heart hammering against my ribs, expecting a medical emergency. But it wasn't an emergency. It was a tribunal. They were all there, arranged on the custom Italian leather sectional I had imported from Milan last Christmas. Julian was sitting in the center, looking impeccably dressed in a crisp navy suit, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. To his left sat Margaret, her posture rigid, her hands clasped tightly in her lap like she was at a funeral. To his right sat Chloe, my sister, and on the adjacent velvet armchair sat my son, Leo. The atmosphere was suffocating. No one was crying. No one looked sad. They looked resolved. "What's going on?" I asked, my breath catching in my throat. I took a step forward, reaching out a hand, but Leo stood up. He didn't come to hug me. He stood like a bouncer at a club, blocking my path to the rest of them. He looked at me with eyes that were devoid of the warmth I had nurtured for 2 decades, eyes that suddenly looked exactly like his father's. "Mom, sit down," Leo said. His voice was cold, deeper than I remembered, stripped of any affection. "You need to listen, and you need to not freak out." "Freak out?" "Leo, you're scaring me. What is this?" "You need to accept a new reality," he continued, reciting words that sounded painfully rehearsed, like lines from a bad play. "You're not in charge of this family anymore." I looked past him to my husband. "Julian, why aren't you saying anything? What is he talking about? What is he talking about?" Julian finally looked up. His handsome face, the face that had been the public image of Thorne and Vance for years, twisted into a look of pity mixed with annoyance. "It's over, Elena. The charade, it's done." "What charade?" I felt like I was drowning on dry land. "Aunt Chloe," Leo said, gesturing to my sister with a weird sense of pride. "She makes Dad happier now. Unlike you, she understands him. She doesn't judge him." The world stopped spinning. I looked at Chloe, my little sister, The one whose credit card debt I had paid off 3 times. The one I had hired as an event coordinator when no one else in New York would give her a job because of her reputation. She was sitting with her legs crossed, wearing a silk blouse that looked suspiciously like the limited edition piece missing from my closet last month. And then I saw it. Julian's hand was resting casually, possessively, on Chloe's knee. "We didn't want you to find out from a tabloid." My mother, Margaret, chimed in. Her voice wasn't apologetic. It was lecturing. "We wanted to do this as a family. Elena, you have to be realistic. You've been married to your work for years. Julian is a man with needs. He needs a wife who is present, not a business partner who sleeps with her laptop." "Mom," I whispered, the betrayal slicing deeper than any knife. "You knew? You're condoning this?" "I'm supporting happiness," Margaret said, lifting her chin defiantly. "Chloe and Julian, they share a connection. They love each other. Elena, it's not something they planned, it just happened. You can't punish them for falling in love." I looked at Chloe. She offered a small, triumphant smile, tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear, and looked down. On her finger, flashing under the crystal chandelier, was a diamond ring. It wasn't a new ring. It was my ring. The vintage emerald-cut diamond Julian had given me for our 20th anniversary, the one that had mysteriously vanished from my jewelry box 6 months ago. I had torn the house apart looking for it, crying for days because I thought I was losing my mind. Julian had told me I was overworked, that I was careless. "That's my ring," I said, my voice trembling with a rage so pure it felt hot in my throat. "It fits her better," Julian said, shrugging as if discussing a menu item. "It was wasted on you. You never wear jewelry anyway. We want you to move out. Tonight." "Move out?" The words hung in the air, absurd and terrifying. "Julian, this is my house. I paid for the down payment with my bonus from the Barclay deal. My name is on the deed." "Not anymore," Leo said, breaking the silence again. "Dad is keeping the house. I'm staying here. It's better if you go. You create too much tension." My son, my baby boy, who I had nursed through fevers, whose Ivy League tuition I paid for by working 80-hour weeks while Julian played golf. He was kicking me out of the home I built. "You're choosing this?" I asked Leo, tears finally stinging my eyes. "You're choosing the woman who is sleeping with your father behind my back? That's your aunt, Leo." "She's not just my aunt anymore," Leo sneered, crossing his arms. "She's the only one who actually listens to me. You just throw money at me and tell me to study. Dad and Chloe? They treat me like an adult. They treat me like a partner." I looked at the 4 of them. My husband, my sister, my mother, my son, the 4 pillars of my life, and every single one of them was rotten to the core. They weren't just breaking my heart. They were dismantling my existence with a casual cruelty that took my breath away. I felt a wave of nausea, but I swallowed it down. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me collapse. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't beg. I straightened my spine, summoning the icy composure I used in boardrooms. I looked at Julian, locking eyes with him until he flinched and looked away. "You think you've won?" I said, my voice quiet but deadly steady. "You think you can just rewrite history because you're bored and selfish?" "Don't make a scene, Elena," Chloe said, her voice sickly sweet. "Let's be mature about this divorce." "Divorce?" I let out a short, dry laugh. "Oh, you have no idea what's coming. Don't threaten us," Julian snapped, his arrogance returning. "I've already spoken to legal. You're out. The prenup, the company bylaws, I have it all covered. Walk out that door, Elena. If you stay, I'll have security remove you from my property." "Your property?" I looked around the room. I picked every tile in this house. I paid for every brick. "And now you're trespassing," Leo said. That was it. The final severing? I looked at my son one last time, memorizing the face of the stranger he had become. "Okay," I said. I turned around. I didn't take my coat off. I didn't pick up my keys from the bowl. I had my spare set in my pocket, I walked to the door. Where are you going? Margaret called out, sudden anxiety spiking her voice. Elena, we need to discuss the settlement. Julian has a generous offer if you sign tonight. I didn't answer. I opened the heavy oak door and stepped out into the freezing New York night. The wind hit my face, drying the tears before they could fall. I got into my car, the engine roaring to life in the silence of the driveway. As I backed out, I saw them through the window. They were already pouring champagne. They were celebrating my erasure. I drove into the darkness, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing for certain. The Elena they knew, the doormat, the provider, the fixer, had died in that living room, and the woman driving away was someone they should be very, very afraid of. I drove for an hour, the city lights blurring into streaks of red and gold through my windshield. My mind was a chaotic storm of images. Chloe's smirk, the ring on her finger, Leo's cold stare, but underneath the shock, a primal instinct was kicking in. Survival. I needed gas. The fuel light had been blinking since I left JFK, but I had been too anxious to get home to stop. Now, on a desolate stretch of the Long Island Expressway, I pulled into a 24-hour gas station. My hands were shaking as I stepped out into the biting cold. I slid my credit card, the Platinum Amex linked to our joint account, the one I used for everything from grocery runs to client dinners, into the pump. Processing. The screen blinked red. Declined. See, cashier. I frowned. That was impossible. The credit limit on that card was limitless, and I had paid the bill in full 3 days ago. I tried again. Declined. A cold pit formed in my stomach, heavier than the betrayal I had just witnessed. I reached into my wallet and pulled out my personal debit card, the one linked to my checking account where my salary was deposited. I walked inside the station. The attendant, a bored teenager with headphones around his neck, didn't even look up as I placed a bottle of water on the counter. I swiped the debit card. It didn't go through, he mumbled, popping his gum. Try it again, I said, my voice tight. There's money in there. He sighed and ran it again. Declined, lady. Insufficient funds or card locked? You got cash? I stood there, paralyzed under the harsh fluorescent lights. My banking app. I needed to check my app. My fingers fumbled with my phone as I logged in. Access denied. User authentication failed. Please contact your branch. I tried the business account. Access denied. I tried the joint savings. Access denied. Julian hadn't just kicked me out of the house. He had executed a financial kill switch. He must have been planning this for weeks, using his power of attorney to change administrative privileges while I was in London. He wanted me destitute. He wanted me stranded in the middle of the night with no resources so I would crawl back and sign whatever generous offer Margaret had mentioned. I dug through my purse, past the useless plastic to the small zipper pocket at the bottom. I found 3 crumpled $20 bills and a handful of quarters. $60. That was my net worth right now. I paid for 5 gallons of gas and the water with cash. I drove until I found a motel near Queens with a flickering neon sign that read vacancy. It was one of those places where truckers slept for a few hours, the kind of place where the sheets smell like stale smoke and regret. Cash up front, the night manager said through bulletproof glass. $50 for the night. I handed over 50 of my remaining $60. He slid a key across the tray. Room 12. The room was freezing. I sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, still in my expensive business suit, my coat wrapped tight around me. I looked at my phone. The screen was lit up with notifications. Not apologies. Not please come back. 118 missed calls. They were mostly from a number I recognized. Julian's personal attorney, a shark named Robert Vance. And then the emails started pinging. Subject: Notice of Termination, Thorne and Vance Developments. I opened it. It was from the HR director, Sarah, a woman I had hired myself. Dear Miss Vance, effective immediately, your position as Chief Operating Officer is terminated for cause. Allegations of corporate espionage and gross negligence. I laughed. A harsh, ragged sound in the empty room. Espionage? Negligence? I was the one who stayed up until 3 a.m. auditing the books. I was the one who knew every zoning law in Manhattan. Julian couldn't even convert a PDF without asking me for help, and then a text message came through. It was from Leo. Leo. Mom, don't make this hard. Dad says he'll cut off my tuition and trust fund if you fight the divorce. He promised me the VP spot next year if I stick with him. You always told me to be ambitious. I'm just doing what you taught me. Please understand. I dropped the phone onto the bed like it was burning hot. That was the final erasure. Julian hadn't just taken my money and my job. He had bought my son's soul. He had used the wealth I helped build to bribe my own child against me. I curled up on top of the dirty bedspread. The tears finally came. I cried for the boy I used to read bedtime stories to. I cried for the sister I had protected. I cried for the husband I had believed in. But as the night wore on, the tears dried. Something else began to settle in my chest. It was cold and heavy like a stone. They thought they had erased me. They thought that by taking the credit cards and the passwords, they had taken my power. They forgot one thing. They forgot who built the castle they were sitting in. They forgot who designed the security systems, who wrote the contracts, and who knew where the bodies were buried. Julian thought Thorne and Vance ran on his charm. He was about to learn that it ran on my brain. And while he might have stolen the keys to the front door, he had forgotten that the architect always leaves a back door. I stared at the water stain on the ceiling, waiting for the sun to rise over New York. I wasn't Elena the wife anymore. I wasn't Elena the mother. I was Elena the strategist. And I was about to bring the whole house down. Sleep was impossible in that Queen's motel room. The traffic noise from the Van Wyck Expressway was a constant, mechanical drone, vibrating the thin glass of the window. But it wasn't the noise outside that kept me awake. It was the noise inside my head. Memories, sharp and jagged, played on a loop, projecting against the peeling beige wallpaper. To understand why I was lying on a dirty mattress with $10 in my pocket and a vendetta burning in my chest, I had to go back. I had to look at the foundation of my life and realize it had been cracked from the very beginning. I grew up in a small, Rust Belt town in Pennsylvania. My father left when I was 7, leaving my mother, Margaret, to raise us alone. His departure broke something in her, or maybe it just revealed who she really was. She was a woman who needed to be adored, who withered without constant attention. She projected that desperate need onto her children, or rather, onto one child. Chloe was born beautiful. Even as a baby, she had ringlets of golden hair and big, blue saucer eyes that made strangers stop in the street. I was plain brown hair, serious eyes, sturdy. I was the responsible one. Chloe was the princess. I worked 3 jobs to pay for my own tuition at NYU. Chloe got modeling lessons that went nowhere. I became an analyst. Chloe became a socialite on my dime. And then I met Julian. It was 22 years ago at a real estate networking mixer in Soho. He was 29, wearing a suit that didn't quite fit, holding a glass of cheap Chardonnay and holding court with a group of skeptical investors. He was electric. He had a smile that could sell sand to a desert nomad. A laugh that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. I was 25, a junior analyst at a top firm, standing in the corner clutching my binder of market research. I watched him work the room. He was charismatic, yes, but I could hear what he was saying. He was spouting buzzwords, making promises about returns on a Brooklyn brownstone renovation that were mathematically impossible. He cornered me by the buffet. "You look like you're analyzing the structural integrity of the crab cakes," he joked. I didn't smile. "I'm analyzing your pitch to those investors. You're promising a 15% cap rate on a property in a declining district. You're going to lose their money." He blinked, surprised. Then he laughed. "Okay, you caught me. I'm an idea man, not a numbers guy. I need someone who understands the boring stuff." "The boring stuff is what keeps you out of prison," I said dryly. He fell in love with me, or at least with what I could do for him right then and there. Within 6 months, we were married. Within a year, we started Thorne and Vance Developments. The division of labor was established immediately. Julian was the face. He was the CEO. He took the client meetings at the Pierre, played tennis with the developers, and gave the interviews to Forbes. He loved the spotlight. He loved the title. I was the strategist. I was the COO. But really, I was everything else. I found the properties. I negotiated the loans. I managed the contractors. I fought with the city council over zoning permits. I did the taxes, the payroll, the legal compliance. For 20 years, I built the stage, set the lights, and wrote the script. Julian just walked out, took the bow, and absorbed the applause. And because Julian was lazy with details, he hated reading contracts, hated compliance, and absolutely loathed passwords. I set up the digital infrastructure. Just fix it, Elena, was his catchphrase. So, I did. I created the intricate web of LLCs to limit liability. I set up the automated banking transfers. And because Julian was paranoid about employees stealing from him, he insisted on a localized, highly encrypted internal server for our most sensitive financial data. He wanted a skeleton key, a master administrative access code that could bypass all other protocols in case we ever got locked out or held hostage by IT. Only you and I will know the skeleton key, he had said, feeling like a spy in a movie. But Julian never bothered to memorize the complex 64-character string I generated. He wrote it on a sticky note, put it in his desk drawer for a week, and then threw it away, assuming I would always be there to type it in for him. He was right. I was always there. Until yesterday. Now, sitting in the motel as the gray morning light filtered through the dirty curtains, I opened my laptop. Thankfully, I had a portable 5G hotspot in my bag, a habit from years of traveling for work. Julian couldn't cut off a device he didn't know existed. I didn't log into the bank accounts yet. I knew those doors were bolted shut. Instead, I navigated to the login screen for the Thorne and Vance private server. The VPN tunnel was secure. Julian thought that by calling the bank and removing me as a signatory, he had cut me off. He thought that by firing me through HR, he had revoked my access. He relied on standard protocols. He relied on the front door. He forgot about the skeleton key. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I typed in the string of characters. It was a line from a poem I loved, Invictus, mixed with the GPS coordinates of the first building we ever bought in Hell's Kitchen, and the date Leo lost his first tooth. Julian didn't know the poem. He didn't know the coordinates. And he certainly didn't remember the date. Authentication processing. Access granted. Administrator level, 00 on. The screen flooded with data. The entire nervous system of Thorne and Vance Developments lay open before me. The screen was a wall of cascading text and numbers. Emails, bank transfers, wire logs, tax documents, and private chat histories. I wasn't just looking at a company ledger anymore. I was looking at the autopsy of my marriage. I started downloading. I didn't just want a few files. I wanted everything. Every email Julian had sent in the last 5 years, every expense report, every wire transfer to the Cayman Islands or Switzerland, and that's when I saw it. A folder hidden deep within the miscellaneous assets directory named Project C. It wasn't a construction project. C stood for Chloe. I opened the folder, and the blood drained from my face, leaving me cold in the already freezing room. This wasn't just an affair. This was embezzlement on a massive, industrial scale. I opened the spreadsheets, dates, amounts, receipts. January 12th, $50,000 wire to C.V. Consulting. Chloe Vance Consulting. She didn't even try to hide it. February 14th, $12,000. Cartier, 5th Avenue. March 1st, $6,500, monthly rent, luxury suite at the Carlyle. He had been keeping Chloe like a concubine on the company dime for 3 years. While I was negotiating with contractors to save 5% on steel beams, Julian was wiring our profits to my sister to pay for her lifestyle, but it went deeper. I saw transfers to a shell company I didn't recognize, Nebula Ventures. I pulled up the corporate registry for Nebula. The signatory wasn't Julian. It was Chloe. And the assets being transferred into Nebula weren't just cash. They were deeds. Julian was slowly transferring the titles of our most valuable, unencumbered properties, brownstones in the West Village, a warehouse in Dumbo, into this company owned by my sister. He was stripping Thorn and Vance hollow, preparing to leave me with the empty shell, the debts, and the liabilities. While he and Chloe walked away with the hard assets, I felt sick. A physical wave of nausea rolled over me. This wasn't just about replacing me as a wife. This was grand larceny. This was a conspiracy to ruin me completely. But as I scrolled through the documents, a cold, sharp smile touched my lips. Julian was an actor, not an architect. He didn't understand the paperwork he was signing. In his arrogance, and in Chloe's greed, they had made mistakes. Sloppy, amateur mistakes. I opened the transfer deeds for the West Village properties. I zoomed in on the signature line. Elena Vance. It was my signature. But I hadn't signed this. I was in Tokyo when this document was dated. I looked closer. It was a digital copy-paste of my signature from a different PDF. A pixelated artifact surrounding the ink. They had forged my signature. And then, the pièce de résistance. On the operating agreement for Nebula Ventures, Chloe had to list a permanent address for the LLC. She hadn't used her hotel suite. She hadn't used a P.O. box. She had listed my address. The Hamptons estate. The house I paid for. I had them. I had them, dead to rights. But I couldn't strike yet. If I went to the police now, Julian would claim it was a clerical error. He'd pay a fine, bribe a judge, and bury me in litigation for years. He had the expensive lawyers on retainer. I had $10 and a Metro card. No. I needed to let them hang themselves. I needed them to feel safe. I needed them to think I was defeated, broke, and hiding in a hole, crying over old photo albums. I closed the laptop, my heart beating with a slow, rhythmic thud. I had the blueprints of their destruction. Now I just needed the demolition crew. I checked the clock. It was 2 p.m. I had been working for 12 hours straight. I was hungry, unwashed, and running on pure adrenaline. I needed a burner phone. I couldn't use my cell. Robert Vance, Julian's lawyer, was probably tracking it or pulling the call logs. I went to the bodega across the street, buying a cheap prepaid smartphone with cash. Back in the room, I sat on the bed and stared at the plastic device. Who could I call? My friends? Most of them were couple friends, loyal to the status and the parties Julian threw. They would side with the charming Julian, or stay neutral to avoid the drama. My family? Obviously not. My employees? Too risky. They feared for their jobs. I needed someone powerful. Someone who hated Julian. Someone who had the resources to fight a war and the pettiness to enjoy it. A name popped into my head. Silas Blackwood. Silas was a billionaire real estate tycoon in Manhattan. Old money, ruthless, but principled in his own twisted way. 3 years ago, Julian had outbid Silas for the Hudson Yards project, a prime piece of land on the west side. Julian had won by bribing a city zoning official to reclassify the land usage, a move I had fiercely opposed but that Julian had executed behind my back while I was on maternity leave with Leo. Silas had suspected foul play. He had publicly called Julian a snake in a cheap suit at the Real Estate Board of New York Gala. Julian had laughed it off, but Silas Blackwood never forgot a grudge. If I went to Silas with proof of Julian's fraud, specifically the fraud that screwed Silas out of the Hudson Yards deal, it was a Hail Mary. Silas might just laugh at me. He might throw me out, but he was the only person in New York with enough power to shield me from Julian's legal team. I dialed the number for Blackwood Enterprises. I knew it by heart. I had stared at it enough times when we were rivals. Blackwood Enterprises. Executive Office. A crisp, British voice answered. I need to speak to Mr. Blackwood. Mr. Blackwood is in meetings. May I ask what this is regarding? Tell him it's Elena Vance. Tell him I know how Julian Thorne got the Hudson Yards zoning permit. And tell him I have the emails. There was a pause. Hold, please. 30 seconds later, a gruff, deep voice came on the line. Mrs. Vance. To what do I owe the pleasure? Is your husband sending you to gloat? My husband just fired me, emptied my bank accounts, and moved his mistress into my house, I said, my voice steady, cutting through the static. I'm not here to gloat, Mr. Blackwood. I'm here to burn him to the ground. Silence. Then, a low, dark chuckle. And I thought you might want to bring the matches, I added. I'm listening, Silas said. Be at the St. Regis Library in 1 hour. Come alone. I walked into the St. Regis Hotel on East 55th Street, wearing the same rumpled suit I had fled my house in, carrying a laptop bag that contained enough digital evidence to send my husband to federal prison for 20 years. The doorman looked at me with skepticism. My hair was windblown, my eyes red-rimmed, but when I mentioned Silas Blackwood, his posture straightened as if I had pulled a gun. Right this way, Mrs. Vance. The library at the St. Regis smelled of old money, leather-bound books, and cognac. It was a world Silas Blackwood ruled. I found him sitting in a wingback chair by the fireplace, reading the Financial Times. He was 65, with silver hair cropped close and eyes like polished flint. He didn't stand up when I approached. Mrs. Vance, he said, folding his newspaper. You look terrible. And I feel terrible, I admitted, sinking into the chair opposite him. But my brain is working just fine. You mentioned the Hudson Yards deal, Silas said, cutting to the chase. You said you had proof. I opened my laptop. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I pulled up the dossier I had compiled in the motel room and turned the screen toward him. 3 years ago, Julian outbid you for the Hudson Yards land. You suspected he bribed the zoning commissioner, Frank Miller. You were right. Silas leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the screen. Here is the wire transfer, I said, pointing to the spreadsheet. $50,000 to a shell company called Miller Consulting. And here are the emails between Julian and Miller discussing the expedited rezoning fee. Julian was sloppy. He used his personal email for the initial contact. Silas scanned the documents. His expression didn't change, but the air around him seemed to drop a few degrees. Why are you showing me this now? You were the COO. You benefited from this deal. I didn't know, I said, my voice steady. Julian kept a shadow ledger. I found it last night after he kicked me out of my house, froze my accounts, and moved my sister into my bed. Silas looked up, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. Your sister? And my mother is cheering them on, I added, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. It's a regular family reunion, and I'm the only one not invited. I took a breath. Mr. Blackwood, I didn't come here to gossip. I came here to make a deal. Julian is trying to destroy me. He's forged my signature on fraudulent loans. He's embezzling company funds to pay for my sister's Cartier habit. He's going to leave Thorne and Vance a smoking crater. .com. And you want me to save you? Silas asked, raising an eyebrow. No, I said, leaning in. I want you to help me bury him. And in exchange, I will give you the Hudson Yards deed. Silas paused. Go on. Silas paused. Go on. Julian is overleveraged. He's cash poor. He's about to default on the construction loans for the new Tribeca high-rise because he spent the liquidity on a wedding venue. If you step in as a white knight investor now, offering a bridge loan to save the project, he'll take it. He's desperate. And in the loan agreement, we include a collateral clause. If he defaults, which he will, because I know the real numbers, you seize the assets. Specifically, the Hudson Yards deed. Silas stared at me for a long moment. The fire crackled in the grate. Then, a slow, Predatory smile spread across his face. You're vindictive, aren't you? Silas said softly. I'm efficient, I corrected. Julian thinks I'm a scorned wife who's going to cry in a corner. He doesn't realize I'm the one who wrote his business plan. Silas closed my laptop and pushed it back toward me. I like you, Elena. You have grit. Julian always struck me as a peacock, all feathers, no flight. But you're a hawk. He pulled out his phone. I'm going to call my personal counsel, David Cohen. He's the best litigator in New York. He'll represent you in the divorce. Pro bono. Consider it an investment in our new partnership. Thank you, I whispered. Relief finally flooding through my veins. And Elena, Silas added, his voice hardening. Don't disappoint me. If we do this, we destroy him completely. No mercy. No taking him back when he cries. He won't be crying, I said, thinking of the smirk on Julian's face when he took my ring. Good, Silas said. Now, let's get you a hotel room that doesn't charge by the hour. You can't plan a war if you haven't slept. That night, I slept in a suite at the Four Seasons, paid for by Blackwood Enterprises. I took a long bath, scrubbing the Queen's Motel grime off my skin. As I lay in the crisp, clean sheets, I felt a shift deep inside me. For 20 years, I had been the fixer. Now, I was the executioner. Before I closed my eyes, I opened one last file on my laptop. The Leo Vance Trust. I needed to know how deep the rot went with my son. I saw the recent modification to the trust terms. Dated 2 weeks ago. Immediate access to $200,000 cash disbursement. Transfer of title. 2024 Aston Martin Vantage. And the attached text log from Julian's phone backup. Julian. Stick with me, kid. Mom treats you like a child. I treat you like a VP. You want the car? You want the cash? You just have to back me up when the lawyers ask about Mom's mental state. Leo, VP? Seriously? Okay, I'm in. She's been annoying me anyway about grades. I closed the laptop. My heart didn't break this time. It calcified. My son had sold me for a sports car and a title he couldn't spell. I picked up my burner phone and texted Silas one word. Ready. 3 days later. The trap was set. Silas's lawyer, David Cohen, was a terrifyingly calm man who wore bespoke suits and smiled like a shark sensing blood in the water. He had drafted the settlement agreement. It was a masterpiece of legal misdirection. On the surface, it looked like a total surrender. 1. Julian Thorne keeps the marital home in the Hamptons. 2. Julian Thorne keeps full ownership of Thorne and Vance Developments. 3. Elena Vance receives a lump sum of $500,000, a fraction of what I was owed. 4. Elena Vance waives all claims to future spousal support. It looked like I was broken, desperate for cash, and just wanted to run away. Julian would love it. It fed his ego perfectly. But buried deep in the 60-page document, in Section 14, Subsection C, Paragraph 4, was the poison pill clause. In the event that any party to this agreement is found to have engaged in undisclosed criminal activity, fraud, or embezzlement during the marriage, or is convicted of a felony within 24 months of signing, this entire agreement is void ab initio. In such case, all assets, including 100% of company stock and real property, shall revert to the non-offending party as punitive damages. Julian never read the fine print. He paid lawyers to do that. But his lawyer, Robert Vance, no relation, just a sycophant, was lazy. I knew that because I used to pay his bills. Vance skimmed contracts. He looked for the big numbers, the payout, the alimony. He wouldn't be looking for a specific reversion clause buried in boilerplate text about liability. I met Julian and his lawyer at Vance's office in Midtown. I wore no makeup. I wore an old, oversized sweater and jeans. I kept my head down, looking at the floor. I needed to sell the image of the defeated woman. Julian walked in like he owned the city. He was wearing a new Tom Ford suit, and he smelled of expensive cologne, probably a gift from Chloe. Well, look who crawled out of her hole, Julian sneered as he sat down. I hope you're ready to sign, Elena. Chloe and I have wedding invitations to order. We're doing it at the plaza in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. That was my timeline. Just give me the check, I said, my voice trembling. I just want to leave, Julian. I can't fight you anymore. Julian laughed, glancing at Vance. See? I told you she'd fold. She doesn't have the stomach for the real world without me. Vance slid the papers across the mahogany table. Standard agreement, Elena. You walk away with $500,000. Clean break. Just sign here, here, and here. I picked up the pen. My hand shook, partially acting, partially pure adrenaline. What about Leo? I asked softly. Leo is staying with me, Julian said, leaning back in his chair, putting his feet up on the desk. He's my VP of acquisitions now. We're going to build an empire together. Without your constant nagging about ethics and regulations. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, but I swallowed it. Okay. Take care of him. Just sign the damn papers, Elena. I signed. I put my name on the line that would seemingly strip me of 20 years of hard work. Then Julian signed. He did it with a flourish, a big, arrogant loop on the J. Done, Vance said, closing the folder. The check will be wired to your account tomorrow. Julian stood up and buttoned his jacket. He looked down at me with a smirk that made my skin crawl. You know, Elena, you should thank me. You were always too uptight for this life. Go move to a farm or something. Find a nice librarian. Goodbye, Julian, I whispered. As I walked to the elevator, I heard Julian laughing with Vance. That was easier than I thought. She didn't even ask for the beach house. The elevator doors closed, cutting off his laughter. I leaned against the metal wall and let out a long breath. He had signed. The poison pill was active. Now, all I had to do was prove the fraud. And I already had the evidence. I just needed the right stage to present it. And what better stage than the wedding at the plaza? I walked out of the building and into Silas's waiting town car. Did he sign? Silas asked from the back seat. He signed, I said, a genuine smile finally breaking through the mask of defeat. He thinks he bought my silence for $500,000. He just signed over his entire life. Silas handed me a glass of sparkling water. To the architect, he said. To the demolition, I replied. The next 3 weeks were a study in masochism. I had to stay invisible while Julian and Chloe paraded their victory all over New York. I rented a small, nondescript apartment in the Upper West Side using my maiden name. I spent my days with Silas's forensic accountants, turning the raw data I had stolen into a legal sledgehammer. We were building a case that was airtight. But I also kept an eye on my family. Chloe's Instagram was a vomit of luxury. Photo of the new Aston Martin. Leo's bribe. Photo of my dining room redecorated with tacky gold wallpaper. Caption: finally making this house a home. Number: new beginnings. And the most painful posts came from my mother, Margaret. She posted a photo of the 3 of them, Julian, Chloe, and herself, raising champagne flutes at Le Bernardin. Caption: finally, a family that knows how to enjoy life. So proud of my beautiful daughter Chloe, and my wonderful son-in-law Julian. True love always wins. True love. She had sold her eldest daughter for a seat at a fancy table. And Leo. Leo was silent on social media, but I saw the credit card alerts on the secondary accounts. I still monitored the ones Julian hadn't found yet. Club Nebula, $2,000. The Box, $1,500. Bail Bondsman, $500. My son was spiraling. Julian wasn't parenting him. He was enabling him. I wanted to rush in and save him, but Silas stopped me. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, Elena. Silas told me gently. He chose his side. Let him see what that side really looks like when the lights go out. I knew he was right, but it felt like cutting off a limb. 2 days before the wedding, I received the final piece of leverage. It came from an unexpected source. My phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Elena? It's Dave. Dave. Chloe's ex-husband. The mechanic she had bled dry before moving on to my husband. Dave, I said, surprised. I'm okay. Look, I heard about what happened. What they did to you. It's sick. It is. I agreed. I have something, Dave said, his voice lowering. When Chloe left me, she left a box of papers in the garage. I was going to burn them, but I went through them last night. Elena, she has credit cards in your name. From 3 years ago. My blood ran cold. What? She opened them when she was staying with you. She intercepted the mail, she maxed them out and then hid the statements. But I found a letter from Julian. From Julian? Yeah. He paid off one of the cards. The letter says, I covered this one, see, but you have to be more careful. If Elena sees this on the credit report, we're both dead. Keep sticking to the plan. 2 more years and we take it all. 2 more years. The timeline matched perfectly. Julian had been conspiring with my sister to steal my identity and my money while I was feeding her and giving her a job. Dave, I said, my voice shaking. Can you bring me that box? I'm on my way. I hung up the phone. The final lock had clicked into place. This wasn't just fraud. This was a conspiracy. Predatory, calculated, and evil. I looked out the window at the skyline of Manhattan. The wedding was in 48 hours. Get ready, Julian, I whispered to the glass. Here comes the bride. The day before the wedding, I did something dangerous. I went to see Leo. Silas advised against it. He's compromised, Silas had warned, stirring his tea in the safe house. He's not your son right now, Elena. He's Julian's asset. I knew he was right. Strategically, it was a mistake. But I was a mother first, and a vengeful ex-wife second. I needed to give him one last chance to step off the sinking ship before I torpedoed the hull. I waited outside his new penthouse apartment on Park Avenue, the one Julian had rented for him using the embezzled construction funds from the Tribeca project. At 11 a.m., Leo stumbled out, looking hungover. He was wearing designer sunglasses and a Balenciaga hoodie that cost more than my first car. Leo, I called out. He jumped, spinning around. When he saw me standing by the curb, his face hardened. Mom, what are you doing here? You're stalking me now. I'm not stalking you. I'm trying to save you. I don't need saving, he spat, walking toward the sleek, silver Aston Martin Vantage parked at the curb the bribe Julian had promised him. I'm doing great. Dad just put me in charge of the South Side portfolio. Leo, listen to me, I said, stepping into his path. The wind whipped my hair, but I held my ground. Your father is lying to you. The company is bankrupt. He's stealing money to pay for this lifestyle. He's using you as a shield. When the feds come, and they are coming, your name is on the documents. You're the VP of acquisitions. You signed the papers for the shell companies. Leo laughed. It was a hollow, brittle sound. You're just jealous. You're jealous because Dad is winning, and you're nobody. You're living in some dump, right? Dad told me. I'm living in reality, I said, my voice urgent, grabbing his arm. Leo, please, don't go to the wedding tomorrow. Just call in sick. Go stay with your friends in Jersey. Just don't be there standing next to him when it happens. When what happens? He challenged, yanking his arm away. You going to crash it? You going to make a scene? God, you're pathetic, Mom. Dad said you'd try to ruin it because you can't handle being replaced. Pathetic. The word landed like a slap. I felt the anger rising, hot and fast, but I pushed it down. Leo, look at me. I raised you. I know you. You're not this person. You're kind. You're smart. You're not a thief. I'm not a thief, he shouted, his face turning red, attracting stares from passers-by on Park Avenue. I'm a businessman. Like Dad. Dad is a fraud, I shouted back. And Chloe is a parasite. And if you stay with them, You're going down with them. I found the emails, Leo. I know about the liability talk. Leo glared at me, his jaw working. For a second, I saw doubt in his eyes, but then he pulled out his phone. I'm calling security. Get away from me. He got in the car and revved the engine aggressively. As he peeled out of the parking spot, nearly clipping my knees, he rolled down the window and yelled, "Don't come tomorrow, Mom. Nobody wants you there. You're the past." I watched him drive away, the roar of the Aston Martin fading into the city noise. My heart broke all over again, but this time, the brake was cleaner. Surgical. I had tried. I had extended the hand. He had slapped it away. Now, he was on his own. I drove back to my temporary apartment. Silas was waiting for me with the final preparations. "How did it go?" he asked, though he clearly knew the answer from my face. "He's gone," I said flatly. "He's fully brainwashed." "Then, he learns the hard way," Silas said. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" "Yes." "We have the projector access codes?" "Yes." "The police are briefed?" "Yes." "Detective Miller is meeting us in the lobby of the plaza at 8 p.m. Silas handed me a long, black garment bag. "Then, you'll need this." I unzipped the bag. Inside wasn't a dress. It wasn't a frantic, desperate ex-wife floral print. It was a suit. A sleek, tailored white Alexander McQueen power suit. Sharp lapels, flared trousers, immaculate tailoring. It was the color of ice. It was the color of a ghost coming back to haunt the living. "Wear your armor, Elena," Silas said. "Tomorrow, you're not the victim, you're the executioner." I touched the fabric. It felt cool and smooth. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow is going to be a long night." I didn't rest. I sat by the window watching the Manhattan skyline. I thought about Julian and Chloe probably rehearsing their vows right now, probably laughing about how they had gotten away with it. 2 more years and we take it all. They wouldn't get 2 years. They wouldn't even get 2 days. Tomorrow, Mr. and Mrs. Thorne were going to have a very different kind of reception. The morning of the wedding dawned gray and overcast, a perfect New York day for a funeral. I spent the morning reviewing the presentation with Silas's tech team. We had timed it perfectly. It would start right after the love story video montage that Chloe had spent $30,000 producing. At 6 p.m., the guests began to arrive at the Plaza Hotel. I watched the live stream from a hidden camera Silas had planted in the grand ballroom. Since Blackwood Enterprises owned a minority stake in the hotel chain, getting access was trivial. It was nauseating. The room was dripping in crystals and pink roses, thousands of them. There was an ice sculpture of Julian and Chloe intertwined. I saw my mother, Margaret, greeting guests. She was wearing a champagne-colored gown that was far too young for her, beaming like she had won the Powerball. "Yes, isn't it wonderful?" I heard her say to a confused cousin via the audio feed. "They are soulmates. Finally, Julian has a woman who appreciates his genius." "Where's Elena?" the cousin asked. "Oh, poor Elena," Margaret sighed dramatically. "She just couldn't handle Mark's success. She's taking some time away. Mental health break, you know." I gripped the edge of the table. Mental health break? They were already seeding the narrative. I saw Julian. He looked nervous but triumphant. He was shaking hands, clapping backs, playing the role of the benevolent king. And Chloe, she walked in wearing a custom Vera Wang gown, dripping in diamonds, diamonds that my company paid for. She looked beautiful, I had to admit. Beautiful and rotten. The ceremony began. I listened to them exchange vows. "I promise to be your partner in all things," Julian said, looking deep into Chloe's eyes. "I promise to support your dreams and spend my life making you happy," Chloe cooed. I sat in the hotel suite upstairs, sipping a black coffee. "Lies," I whispered. "Every word is a lie. Are we good to go?" Silas asked, checking his Patek Philippe watch. "The signal is live," the tech guy confirmed. "As soon as you give the word, we hijack the feed." "Not yet," I said. "Wait for the toasts. Wait until everyone is seated and watching the screens." The reception began. The champagne flowed. Julian stood up to give a speech. "I want to thank everyone for being here," he boomed, holding Chloe's hand. "This has been a long journey. A journey to find true happiness. Sometimes you have to make hard choices to find your real destiny." The crowd applauded politely, though I saw some uncomfortable glances. Everyone in New York real estate knew the scandal. They just didn't care as long as the open bar was premium. "And to my new wife, Chloe," Julian continued, "you are my muse, my rock, my everything." My phone buzzed. "It's the cue. Now," I said into the burner phone. Down in the ballroom, the lights dimmed for the video montage. Sentimental music began to play. Ed Sheeran. Predictably, photos of Julian and Chloe on yachts, in Paris, at the beach, flashed on the massive LED screens behind the head table. The crowd. "Aw, Ed." I stood up and smoothed my white jacket. I walked out of the suite and headed for the elevator. "Showtime," Silas said, walking beside me. Inside the elevator, I watched the numbers tick down. 10, 9, 8. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It was beating slow and heavy, like a war drum. The elevator doors opened on the lobby level. Detective Miller and 4 uniformed NYPD officers were waiting. "Miss Vance?" the detective asked. "Yes. Do you have the warrant?" "We do." "We're ready when you are." "Give me 5 minutes," I said. "I want them to see it before the handcuffs go on." "Understood." I walked toward the ballroom doors. The security guards hired by Julian to keep me out stepped forward. "Ma'am, this is a private event." Silas Blackwood stepped out from behind me. "And I own the hotel. Step aside or you'll be looking for work tomorrow." The guards hesitated, recognized Silas, and immediately stepped back. I pushed open the double doors. Inside, the music had just swelled to a crescendo. The video on the screen showed Julian and Chloe kissing in front of the Eiffel Tower. And then, the screen flickered. The music cut out with a screech of feedback. The room went silent. On the massive screens, the romantic image vanished. In its place, a stark white spreadsheet appeared. Red numbers, and then a document, a credit card statement. Name, Chloe Vance. Address, 124 Hamptons Way, my house. Purchase, Cartier diamond ring, $25,000. Paid by Thorne and Vance corporate account. A murmur rippled through the crowd. "What is that?" Chloe shrieked, standing up. "Julian, fix it!" "Cut the feed," Julian yelled at the AV booth. "Turn it off." But the tech guy in the booth was ours. He didn't turn it off. He turned up the volume. And then my voice, pre-recorded, boomed over the speakers. "Hello, Julian. Hello, Chloe. You wanted a family gathering? You wanted everyone to witness your union. Well, let's show them what this union is really built on." All heads turned, not to the screen, but to the back of the room. I walked in. The silence in the grand ballroom was absolute. 300 people turned in their chairs to look at me. I walked down the center aisle, my heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. The white suit made me look radiant, glowing against the sea of guests. Julian stood frozen at the head table, his face draining of color. Chloe clutched her napkin to her chest, her mouth agape. My mother, Margaret, looked like she was seeing a ghost. "Elena," Julian whispered, the microphone picking up his trembling voice. "What are you doing?" I didn't stop until I reached the center of the dance floor, directly in front of the head table. I looked up at them, the people who had been my world, now just small, frightened figures on a stage. "I'm here to give a toast," I said, my voice projecting clearly. I held up a remote control. I clicked it. The screen behind them changed again. This time, it was the email chain between Julian and the private investigator. "Julian, look harder or make something up. I can't afford to give her half. We'll go with the mental breakdown angle." The crowd gasped. I saw investors' men Julian respected. Men he needed leaning in, whispering furiously. "Turn it off!" Julian screamed, lunging toward the DJ booth. Security! Get her out of here! Sit down, Julian. Silas Blackwood's voice boomed from the doorway. Unless you want to add assault to your list of felonies. Julian froze. He saw Silas. He saw the police officers waiting in the shadows of the exit. This is fake! Chloe yelled, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. She's jealous. She hacked the system. She's crazy. I clicked the remote again. A new document appeared. The forged loan application for the Hudson Yards project. The one with my signature clumsily pasted over the line. Is forgery crazy, Chloe? I asked calmly. Is bank fraud crazy? Because that's federal prison time. And guess whose name is on the shell companies receiving the stolen funds? I clicked again. Nebula Ventures. Owner. Chloe Vance. You. I pointed at my sister. You aren't just a mistress. You are a mule. Julian used you to launder $3 million. Did he tell you that? Did he tell you that when the IRS comes looking, they're coming for your signature? Chloe looked at Julian, her eyes wide with horror. Julian, you said it was tax optimization. You said it was legal. Shut up, Chloe, Julian hissed. Oh, don't stop him, I said, smiling coldly. Let him explain. Let him explain to our mother how he refers to her. Click. The email appeared. Subject, the old bat. Julian, just write Margaret another check from the slush fund. The old bat is greedy. As long as we pay for her condo, she'll keep Elena in the dark. She'd sell her own daughter for a renovation budget. Margaret let out a sound that was half wail, half choke. She stood up, her hands shaking so hard she knocked over her champagne glass. Julian? You called me that? After everything I did for you? I sided with you. I betrayed my own child for you. And look what it got you, Mom. I said, looking at her with pity. A seat at a wedding that's about to become a crime scene. Julian looked around the room, his eyes wild. He saw his empire crumbling in real time. He saw the investors walking out. He saw the end. You signed the settlement, he shouted at me, desperate. You signed it. You waived everything. You can't touch the company. Section 14, I said simply. The poison pill. If you committed a crime, the deal is void. And everything, the house, the company, the assets, reverts to me. Julian's knees gave out. He slumped back into his chair. And Leo? I said, turning my gaze to my son, who was sitting at the end of the table, pale as a ghost. Leo looked at me, terrified. He looked at the screen where his own text messages were now displayed. Tyler VP? Seriously? Okay, I'm in. You wanted to be a businessman, Leo, I said softly. Well, here's your first lesson. Check the partners. I clicked the remote one last time. A video played. It was surveillance footage from the company parking lot, taken just 2 days ago. Julian on video. Once we get the money from Blackwood, we dump the kid. Leo is a liability. We leave him with the tax debt and move to the Caymans. He's too stupid to notice. The ballroom went dead silent. Leo stood up slowly. He looked at his father. The hero worship in his eyes was gone, replaced by a shattering realization. Dad? Leo whispered. You were going to leave me? Julian stammered. Leo, no. It was. I was just stressed. It's out of context. You called me stupid, Leo said, his voice cracking. You said I was a liability. Leo, sit down, Julian ordered, trying to regain control. Don't listen to her. Leo didn't sit down. He picked up his glass of champagne and threw it in Julian's face. I hate you, Leo screamed. I hate you. Chaos erupted. Margaret was sobbing. Chloe was hyperventilating. Julian was wiping champagne off his face, looking like a drowned rat. I lowered the remote. The presentation was over. I nodded to Detective Miller. The police marched into the room. The guests parted like the Red Sea. Julian Thorne, the detective announced. You are under arrest for bank fraud, embezzlement, and forgery. Chloe Vance, you are under arrest for conspiracy and money laundering. No! Chloe shrieked as the officer grabbed her wrists. I didn't know. I'm just the girlfriend. He made me do it. Tell it to the judge, the officer said, snapping the handcuffs on. Julian didn't scream. He just stared at me. As they cuffed him, he looked me in the eye. You ruined everything, he spat. You bitter, vindictive bitch. I walked up to him. I stood so close I could smell the fear on him. I didn't ruin anything, Julian, I said. Calm as a frozen lake. I just turned on the lights. And you? You're just a cockroach who got caught. They dragged him away. The wedding guests were stunned into silence. The only sound was Margaret's weeping. I looked at the head table one last time. The cake was uncut. The flowers were perfect. The illusion was destroyed. I turned to Silas Blackwood. I think I'm done here. Brilliant, Silas said, offering me his arm. Absolutely brilliant. As we walked out, I didn't look back at my crying mother or my devastated son. Not yet. They had made their bed. Tonight, they had to sleep in it. The days following the red wedding at the plaza were a media circus. The New York Post ran the story on the front page for 3 days straight. The headline was almost too perfect. Wedding bell blues. Real estate tycoon arrested at altar. I didn't give interviews. I didn't go on talk shows. I let the evidence speak for itself. The viral clip of Julian getting hit in the face with champagne by his own son had over 20 million views before the weekend was over. I moved back into my Hamptons estate 3 days later. The police had cleared it as a crime scene after seizing the servers in the basement. It was strange walking back into the rooms I had designed, the sanctuary I had built. Chloe's presence was everywhere, like a lingering infection. Tacky clothes in my closet, cheap fashion magazines on the coffee table, half-empty wine bottles on the granite counters. I hired a specialized cleaning crew. Throw it all out, I told the foreman. Everything that isn't mine. Burn the sheets. Replace the mattresses. If she touched it, I don't want to see it. I wanted to scrub their DNA from my life. Julian was denied bail. The judge deemed him a massive flight risk because of the Monaco and Cayman Islands plans caught on tape. He was sitting in Rikers Island, trading his Tom Ford suits for a gray jumpsuit. Chloe managed to make bail, paid for by my mother, Margaret, who had foolishly liquidated her IRA to get her baby out. But Chloe wasn't free. She was facing 5 to 10 years for conspiracy and wire fraud. Her face was plastered all over the internet as the gold digger who groomed herself for a prison cell. I walked into the Thorne and Vance offices in Midtown, now solely mine. The employees greeted me with a mix of fear and relief. They had seen the news. They knew who the real power was. We're renaming the company, I announced at the first all-hands meeting. Thorne and Vance is dead. Welcome to Vanguard Estates. They applauded. They knew who signed the paychecks. A week later, my mother came to see me. She looked 10 years older than she had at the wedding. Her hair was unkempt, her eyes red from crying. She stood on my porch in the Hamptons, shivering in the autumn wind. Elena, she said, her voice trembling. Margaret, I said, blocking the door. I didn't call her Mom. You can say what you need to say from there. She flinched. Can I come in? It's freezing. No, you lost your key privileges when you helped my husband embezzle my money. Elena, please be reasonable. Chloe, she's terrified. She's just a girl, she didn't know what she was doing. Julian manipulated her. Chloe is 40 years old, I said coldly. She knew she was sleeping with my husband. She knew she was spending my money. She signed the papers. She's an adult, Margaret. She's your sister! Margaret wailed. You can't let her go to prison. You have to drop the charges. Tell the district attorney it was a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a crime. And you? You are an accomplice. I saw the checks Julian wrote you. Consulting fees. You took money to help them gaslight me. Margaret went pale. Her sorrow instantly curdled into the familiar venom she had spewed my whole life. If you do this, you are no daughter of mine. You are destroying this family. I laughed. It was a light, free sound that startled the seagulls overhead. Margaret, you destroyed this family 20 years ago when you decided Chloe was the princess and I was the servant. You didn't come here to apologize. You came here to ask me to fix it again. You want me to be the scapegoat one last time so Chloe can walk free. I stepped back to close the door. I'm not pressing charges against you, Margaret. Not because I love you, but because I don't want the embarrassment of seeing my mother in a mugshot. But you are dead to me. Do not call me. Do not come here. If you need money, ask Chloe. Oh, wait. She's broke. I slammed the heavy oak door in her face. I watched on the security camera as she stood there, banging on the wood, screaming my name, before finally slumping her shoulders and walking away. It hurt. Of course it hurt. But it was the pain of pulling out a splinter sharp, then relief. Then there was Leo. He hadn't called. He hadn't come by. I knew he was crashing on a friend's couch in Brooklyn because the authorities had seized the Park Avenue penthouse and the Aston Martin. I waited. I knew he had to come to me on his own terms. 2 weeks later, he showed up at my office at Vanguard Estates. He looked terrible. He had lost weight, and the arrogance that Julian had instilled in him was gone. He was wearing old jeans and a plain t-shirt. No sunglasses. No attitude. "Mom?" he asked from the doorway. I looked up from my desk. "Hello, Leo." He walked in and sat in the chair opposite me. He couldn't meet my eyes. He looked at his hands, which were shaking. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I know," I said. "I was stupid. He made me feel important. He told me I was better than school. He told me you were holding me back. And you believed him because it was easier than working." I said gently but firmly. "Yeah," he admitted, tears dripping onto his jeans. "I saw the video. He called me a liability. He was going to leave me. He was. I have nothing, Mom. They took the car. I have no money. I need help." I looked at my son. Every instinct in my body wanted to hug him, to write him a check, to fix everything. But I was the architect now. And you don't build a strong structure on a cracked foundation. "I love you, Leo," I said. "But I'm not going to give you money." He looked up, panicked. "But where will I live?" "I don't know. That's for you to figure out." "Mom, please. Here is the deal," I said, sliding a piece of paper across the mahogany desk. "This is an application for a student loan resumption. And this is a job application for the mail room at Vanguard Estates. Minimum wage. You start at the bottom. You finish your degree at night. The mail room?" he asked, shocked. "Take it or leave it. If you want to be a man, Leo, you earn it. Julian gave you things to buy you. I'm offering you nothing so you can build yourself." He stared at the papers. He stared at me. He saw the resolve in my eyes, the steel that had taken down his father. Slowly, he reached out and took the pen. "Okay," he said, his voice shaking. "I'll take the job." "Good. Report to Sarah in HR. She'll get you a badge. Don't be late." He stood up. He looked at me. Really looked at me for the first time in years. "You're really scary, Mom," he said, a hint of admiration in his voice. "I know," I smiled. "Now get to work." The trial was short. The evidence was overwhelming. Julian Thorne pleaded guilty to avoid a 20-year sentence. He got 8 years in federal prison plus restitution. He looked gray and defeated in the courtroom. He didn't look at me once. Chloe took a plea deal, 3 years in prison for fraud. She sobbed when the gavel came down. She looked at Margaret in the gallery, screaming, "Mom, do something!" Margaret was living in a studio apartment in Queens, living off Social Security, having lost her allowance and her pride. I sat in the back row wearing my white suit. I watched justice be served. I didn't feel joy. I felt peace. The balance sheet was finally corrected. 1 year later, I stood in my office on the 40th floor, overlooking the Hudson River. The Vanguard Estates sign on the wall behind me was sleek silver and blue. The company was thriving. We had just closed the Hudson Yards deal with Silas Blackwood. It was going to be a mixed-use development, luxury condos, yes, but also affordable housing and a community center. My phone buzzed. Leo. Hey Mom. Just finished my econ final. Think I aced it. Also, the mailroom team improved sorting efficiency by 15% this week. Do I get a raise? I smiled. Elena. Don't push it, but dinner is on me tonight. 7 p.m. See you there, 7 p.m. He was working hard. He was tired, broke, and humble, and I had never been prouder of him. He was becoming the man I knew he could be, not the caricature his father tried to mold. There was a knock on my door. Come in. Silas Blackwood walked in, holding a bottle of vintage champagne. To the 1-year anniversary, he said. Of the day you burned down the plaza. It seems like a lifetime ago, I said, taking the glass. You know, Silas said, leaning against my desk. Julian sent me a letter from prison. He wants to know if I'll buy his residual shares of the old shell companies. He needs money for the commissary. What did you tell him? I told him I only do business with the CEO. And the CEO is busy building an empire. We clinked glasses. I looked out at the New York skyline, the city of steel and glass. I had lost a husband. I had lost a sister. I had lost a mother. But I had found myself. I wasn't the scapegoat anymore. I wasn't the fixer. I wasn't the invisible wife. I was Elena Vance, the architect. And my life? It was finally, truly mine.